My personal contact with Fay began in the mid-1980s when I approached the centre to see if I could do courses there as part of my sabbatical leave. I had been an academic at the University of Wollongong since 1973 when I began teaching a course in personality theory. Personal construct theory had been included as part of the teaching, though it had not been included in my previous study. Consequently, what I knew about it and what I taught were influenced by its treatment in the textbooks that proliferated in the area. Linda Viney became head of department and set up a personal construct group, which I joined. However, I had difficulty understanding the relationship between Linda's approach and the theory, and neither galvanised my attention. My interests at the time were in the feminist critiques and the challenges that they posed for assumptions about psychology as an objective science. These critiques had taken me to the point where I knew much of what was wrong with psychology, but had no way to go forward, no theory and method to address the concerns raised. When I went to the centre in 1985, initially I had little contact with Fay. My first course was an advanced workshop conducted by Dom Bannister. Then I began a 2-week foundation course. At that time, Fay gave the first and last sessions while Helen Jones was the main organiser and teacher, and a very good one at that, though there were a variety of presenters, including Peggy Dalton, who had been central to the teaching there until her husband had become ill. Those who taught had previously overwhelmingly completed the centre's courses. We saw little of Fay, though Montague, one of her cats, made an occasional haughty appearance. Not Victoria, though, she was too shy. The course was a major breakthrough for me. Finally, I found myself understanding the theory at a deep personal level, instead of tritely reciting off corollaries or accepting many of the misleading interpretations propounded in apparently expert secondary sources. The theory is very complex, whereas textbooks presented it as simple. There is a width, and more importantly, a depth that I had not previously glimpsed. I now had a way forward in psychology that took me beyond my negative critique, and so I began my research on dispersion of dependency. But how had this occurred? While doing the courses at the centre, I looked at as much at how things were taught as to their content. Typically, a topic was introduced, like sociality, then participants, sometimes on their own, sometimes in pairs or groups, undertook exercises related to the topic. Then the group discussed further this issue. Generally, the exercises involved self-reflection. Sometimes homework was set. Faye was very big on homework. I subsequently had opportunities to talk to Faye about this teaching. What was involved was an explicit application of the theory to the task. The course as a whole and the individual units within it were framed in their structure using the creativity cycle. Each session began with a link back to the previous session, then commonly a typed presentation of the current topic of focus, an illustrative loosening exercise, and then tightening at the end of the session. As to the whole course, the first and last sessions were relatively tight, whereas the sessions in between involved in their effects loosening. The focus was very much on self-exploration, oneself as a participant in one's experiment. Given Kelly's view that if a theory doesn't help you make sense of your life, then you've discovered a problem with the theory, students applied it to themselves and hence made up their own minds about its relevance. I was not the only one for whom the courses were life-changing. In my case, the impact went beyond adopting personal construct theory as my main theoretical and methodological framework. It also challenged the way I did my job. I came to understand the need to reach beyond the traditional mode of academic teaching to develop ways that individuals could apply the psychology they were learning to themselves, as well as those they dealt with on an everyday basis. I reached the realisation that people have to do personal construct psychology if they were to really understand it. Lecturing provided few opportunities for that to happen. On my return to Australia, I discussed with colleagues the possibility of organising for someone from the centre to come to Wollongong and, with local assistance, run a similar intensive introductory course. The course ran in February 1986. Fay came out to head it with 4 Australians contributing. The course attracted a diverse group of individuals from interstate as well as locals. I sat in just to, most of these people you probably don't know, but on the extreme right is Jackie Costigan, and you can see a young Peter Caputi who will be organising the next conference in the front row next to me, and then Fay, of course, in the middle. The course attracted a diverse group of people from interstate as well as locals. I sat in on all of Fay's sessions observing how she taught, and I still do not think I have seen anyone work with a group in a more skillful fashion. A couple of examples stood out for me. I took the session on laddering and had asked Fay, despite her jet lag, to do the actual laddering. I said I wasn't confident enough to do the laddering so publicly. What I hadn't added was that I was concerned about a particular participant, a woman I liked, but who I knew would be the first to volunteer to be laddered. Further, her responses, I predicted, would be ones with which I would have no idea how to deal. And that is precisely what happened. The first rung of her ladder concerning a construct about shoes appeared to be the very top of the hierarchy. When this happened, Fay didn't miss a beat. She calmly moved on, asking someone else to volunteer, and laddered him or her, generating the more usual multi-step ladder, whereas I would have been floundering around. The same woman was dominating the first session Fay conducted, always talking, jumping in and making it difficult for others to participate. As soon as the pattern became clear, immediately Fay split the large group up into smaller discussion groups. When they came back together, the problem was solved. I tried to talk to Fay about what she did in groups, but it was tacit knowledge that she found she could not talk about. She just did. Several things happened during the fortnight she spent in Australia that completely invalidated my assumptions about Fay the person. As I have said, I knew little of her and got the impression of a fairly careful, well-organised person, conservative, staid, controlled. Denny Hinkle recently described her to me as appearing to be a proper Victorian lady. The first challenge to my view came when I took her to one of the many spectacular scenic viewing spots on the escarpment looking down on Wollongong and out to sea. There were a number of people hang gliding from the lookout. Fay became visibly highly excited, and I had the impression that she would have needed little encouragement to strap on a glider and step off the cliff. I did not know at that time that she'd learned to fly a gypsy moth plane in her 20s, reporting, "We stole, dive, loop the loop, all with an open cockpit." Adventuring, experimentation, pushing the limits was integral to Fay's way of living. On the middle weekend of the course, Fay went to Sydney to stay with a colleague who lives at La Perouse on Botany Bay. She came back with 2 adventures to report. She went windsurfing in the bay with her host's son. I haven't been windsurfing. Oh, sorry. That's the gypsy knot. See. She went windsurfing today with her host son, and I haven't been windsurfing, but I gather the problem is getting the windsurfer up. But anyway, Fay, who was in the 60s at this time, did that, but unfortunately it seemed no one had explained what she had to do after that. Off she went in the northeaster straight out to sea. They had to send the marine rescue to pick her up. That night we were going to a party, they were going to a party at Oyster Bay on the opposite side of Botany Bay, and they decided to go in the host's rigid hull inflatable motorboat, the kind that they use for surf rescues. When it was time to come home, they were all fairly cheerful, and the boat had no lights. Suddenly, in the middle of the bay, Fay yelled starboard. There was what you call a buoy, I think here, or we call a buoy, in the water, which they would have hit, overturning the boat if it hadn't been for Fay's keen eyesight and quick reaction.